Hello and welcome to this video, and in this video I'm going to be ranking the albums of the British singer-songwriter, artist, performer Kate Bush. I really think Kate Bush is one of the greatest British songwriters of all time. She's up there for me with David Bowie, Paul McCartney, Elton John. And of course, Britain, my country, punches well above its weight when it comes to pop and rock music. So that makes her one of the greatest songwriters of all time, you know, in any country. And I think that is the stature of this artist that we're talking about today. Kate Bush really comes out of the sort of progressive rock world, I think. The tendencies and aesthetics that were developed in that genre you see really focused in Kate. She's almost like the Elvis Presley of progressive rock. You know, Elvis came along and took all these rhythm and blues and country influences and put it all together in a form that was really accessible to absolutely everybody and had huge chart success, as we know. And Kate does the same thing. She seems to package all that up. She emerges in 1978 with her first album, Kick Inside, which, you know, is a monumental debut album, especially considering her age. Has a huge amount of hit records. It happens as prog is dying, and I really think she takes forward the sort of torch of those sort of progressive music tendencies and really shows how to integrate those into the pop music world. Right, so what are we looking at with Kate Bush? Well, I'll just grab my notes here, and so I'm just going to write my password back into my laptop. Right. So I've just got my notes for some of the release dates, because Kate more recently has been very sporadic with her releases. You know, so she releases quite regularly up until 1993, and then we have a 12-year gap, and we have to wait for Ariel in 2005, and then there's another 6-year gap, and then she releases 2 albums, you know, and we thought she was back on track and there's all this stuff coming out. She releases 2 albums, Director's Cut and 50 Words for Snow in 2011, and then we really haven't had a solo album or studio album since then, so that's another like 10-11 years, right? So we're really talking about 9 albums that I'm going to be ranking, and I'm going to rattle through the first few because I really want to spend the time talking about the ones higher up the list. So first off, Director's Cut, 2011. I'm going to take that out of the mix. Director's Cut is basically reworkings and remixes of the songs off Red Shoes. There's a few other things there. Red Shoes is one of my least favourite albums, as you'll find out in a minute. And I think it's a bit of an anomaly. I think if I was, you know, to rate this album, I would stick it pretty low. She does some great versions on there, in some cases improving the versions that were on the Red Shoes, which I feel was a bit of a mistake in Kate's discography. But let's just shuffle Director's Cut out the way. So at number 9, right at the bottom, I would probably have the Red Shoes. Now, the Red Shoes, the film, is one of my favourite films of all time, you know. So when this album came out, I was really looking forward to the fact that I thought there would be all these references to Powell and Pressburger. I'm a huge Powell and Pressburger fan. They made films in the 40s and 50s. Such a fan that I may even do my top 10 Powell and Pressburger films on this channel, even though it has nothing to do with jazz fusion. I may do that. So when I saw she was bringing an album out called The Red Shoes, I was very, very excited. What do we get? We get sort of an attempt to really cross over into the pop world in the early 90s to stay relevant. There's a lot of technology, drum machines, programming, sequencing, a lot of attempt to get sort of pop hooks and lots of collaborations with people to try and, you know, bump it up. The songs aren't that memorable, you know, to me. In terms of just comparing it to average albums, it's a very good album, you know, but in you know, relative to Kate's albums, no. So at number 9, I have the Red Shoes. And at number 8, I have her 2011 album, 50 Words for Snow. Now, I've got to be honest, I haven't listened to this album that many times. You know, I don't own a copy of it. I don't own a copy of Red Shoes anymore. That might give you an idea of how much I didn't like that album. At some point in time, that album has gone walkies, and I haven't got it anymore. 50 Words for Snow, I've got digitally, and I have really given it a good listen, and I got to be honest, it's a bit meandery, unfocused, very ethereal, you know. It's very proggy. There's some incredibly long tracks, which rather than being the epics that some of our other more epic tracks are, for me are just a little bit dull and boring. Sorry, Kate. Now, why have I rated it higher than the Red Shoes? Is because I know the Red Shoes really well. I don't know this album so well. It could well be the case if I listened to it, it would grow on me, but it hasn't so far. Sorry, being honest, that's where we're at with those albums. So we now move on to, from now on, so we've done 2 albums, so now we're at number 7. And at number 7, I've got Ariel, which was a sort of comeback album from 2005. I think Ariel's a really fantastic album. It doesn't quite rate with some of the masterpieces we get from Kate later on, but it's a really, really good album. It's a double disc album. The first disc has got a ton of really concise songs on there. Those songs are really, really good. Some of my favourite Kate Bush songs are on that first disc. The second disc is really proggy, you know, so surprising that she brought this out in 2005. It's basically a number of songs that are thematically all joined together, and the sort of concept that pulls it all together is this sort of idea of an English garden, like a day in an English garden, that aesthetic from sort of morning to evening. The bird song and the sounds really play an important role in that conceptually. Are the songs in this as memorable as other Kate Bush songs? Well, definitely not. But I think artistically what she's done there is absolutely incredible. And the lack of coherence amongst all those songs, it's very hard to pick out any song off that disc that is that memorable. But overall, it's very impressive. But I think that's made up by some of the really catchy songs that are on disc 1. So that's what I've got at where will we be? So we've got 50 Words, we've got 1, 2, 3, so I think we're at number 7. Sorry if I get lost in the numbering. So, yeah, so at number 7, Ariel. Number 6, I have the second album by Kate. There is Lionheart. Okay. I have a copy of this one. I have a copy of Ariel. And I was only listening to it the other day, and I have looked everywhere for this album this morning. I have the original evil version with Rolf Harris on it. You know, I bought it. I think I bought that album the day it came out. You know, us Kate Bush fans were so eagerly awaiting that album, so I bought it the day it came out. And I've searched high and low for this, and I cannot find it. So that's really frustrating. So I couldn't hold that one up, but I can hold this one up. I got the CD here of Lionheart by Kate Bush. So Kate Bush emerges in 1978 with one of the greatest debuts of all time, made even more remarkable from the fact that she's like 20 years old when it comes out. And it makes a huge impact, especially on the British music scene. Not so much in America, that comes later, but on the British music scene, a huge impact. And such is the impact, the record label want to bring another album out, and they rush this one out, Lionheart. Now, Kate Bush had been writing songs since she was an early teen. You know, a lot of the songs on the first album she'd written when she was 14, 15, 16 years old. It's a remarkable achievement. So I think they demoed up and recorded more songs than they needed for the first album. So when they got a success on their hands, they pulled in all these other songs. Now these were possibly the rejects off the first album, so none of them are quite as strong as the first album. Having said that, I think the reason why they put it out is because they knew they had 2 hit records, which would be Hammer Horror and Wow. Now, Hammer Horror and Wow are absolutely fantastic, and they are the 2 best songs on here. The other songs are pretty good. Symphony and Blues pretty good. Yeah, there's some good songs. It's just, it sounds very similar to the first album, and in comparison to that, it's nowhere near. You know, so that's mine. Was that number 6? I hope the numbers are going right on this. Number 6, you know, 5, 4, 3, 2. Yeah, that's right. At number 6, we've got Lionheart. It's a great album. I spent some time with this again more recently, just for this ranking. I put it on in the car and listened to it for about a week, thinking it would. I would find some depths in it, but it just never. I think it's just lacking the hooks. It's lacking the pop hooks that the first album has got. That's pretty much all it is. Now, okay, at number 5, this is going to upset people. I'm very, very sorry. Now, it's not because I don't think this album isn't brilliant. I think it is brilliant. It's just the other albums are even more brilliant to me. And I'm going to try and argue my reasoning behind that. But here we have at number 5, The Hounds of Love. Right, her smash hit record that really established her as one of the biggest artists of all time, one of the biggest selling albums of the 1980s. I think this is the one that really established her in America as well. So if you're an American viewer, this is probably the album where you sort of really became across Kate Bush. God, this is an incredible album, you know. Very much like Ariel, you know, except it's a single album. So on the first side, we have the big pop hits, Hounds of Love, Running Up That Hill, Big Sky, Mother Stands for Comfort, Cloud Busting. Hounds of Love, Big Sky and Cloud Busting are 3 of her greatest pop songs. And like I say, these songs rock. You know, they're full of experimentation, full of like the studio being pushed to the limit, but they rock, you know, and it's that progressive rock ethic in the 1980s, but with pop hooks. You know, that's what this is. You know, and those are 3 incredible tracks, but then side 2, The Ninth Wave, which is a big conceptual progressive rock epic, you know, which is really, I always felt, going back to Powell and Pressburger, anyone who's seen A Matter of Life and Death will be aware that whole film sort of may take place, or does it, in the mind of an airman who was dropped into the sea and floats onto the beach, thinks he's dead, but he's not dead. But is he dead? And but if you haven't seen Matter of Life and Death, it is my favourite film. And this conceptual sidelong epic goes into those areas, but it goes on a completely different story. If you look on the back, you can see Kate on the back there. Sorry if that's a bit fuzzy, and she's got the light on. There she is in the sea in the airman's outfit. Kate Bush, like me, is a huge Powell and Pressburger fan, and this album and a few of the albums sort of reference the Powell and Pressburger films. I'm going to throw that in. You know, it's worth another video just to go through Kate's albums and pull out the Powell and Pressburger references. But yes, for any prog fan, I would say that's an essential 80s prog album, and The Ninth Wave is one of the great prog epics of all time. You know, so why have you got it so low? Because we've got some albums to come. Now, this album is not held as high, which I've got at number 4, as Hounds of Love, but I can't help it, I just like it more. And it's this from 1990's Sense Your World. Alright, I just absolutely love this album. Every single song is just a killer song to me. Some of her best songwriting. I think most people would say that this woman's work is one of the most moving, emotional songs written by anybody ever, you know, and that's on this album. The production's absolutely beautiful on here. But things like Rocket's Tale with Dave Gilmour, which is it's got this sort of Bulgarian or Eastern European female singers on it. It really rocks. It's got really something screaming Gilmour. It's my favourite moment from David Gilmour ever. That one really rocks. Some really amazing things like Heads We're Dancing, which is where Kate imagines going to a party and she ends up dancing with an incredible dance partner, and it turns out to be Adolf Hitler. Only Kate can write songs like that. The Fog, where Kate manages to suck you into the sort of primal memories of our childhood halfway through the song. This is a really, really fantastic album. I don't care what anyone says. I think it's a better album than Hounds of Love. I think it's just the expectations were so high, and it didn't have the 3 hit singles, so it was not rated so high at the time. Having said that, The Sense of Your World is just such a ridiculous song, you know, and I think that song is better to me than Hounds of Love and all those, you know. We're talking about what we like and what we don't like, you know, it's really hard to argue it, but there isn't a bad song on here. And I think in terms of Kate's really sideways thinking thematically, this is really got some interesting ideas on. Right, so we're now down to the top three. Okay, so at number 3 we have the debut album, Kick Inside. I have to rate this very high. It's possibly one of the greatest debut albums of all time. Like I said, Kate was discovered, I think, by David Gilmour. He paid for the original demos to be made of this album, if my memory's correct. She'd been writing songs since she was an early teenager. And on here we have some incredible songs, you know. So of course, Wuthering Heights and The Man with the Child in His Eyes. Those are the 2 songs that broke her. I would say they're 2 of the greatest songs ever written. I think if I ever do a top 10 best songs, Man with the Child in His Eyes may well be very high on that list. The other songs are just equally as good. Moving saxophone songs, Strange Phenomena, Kite, James and the Cold Gun, Feel It, Oh to Be in Love, L'Amour Looks Something Like You, Them Heavy People, Room for the Life, and The Kick Inside. This is a really brilliant album. Where do we put it in her career? Well, one of the things that's interesting with this album is the instrumentation is very straight. It's piano, bass, drum, saxophone. Sometimes you'll get a violin or something like that, strings. But on the whole, the instrumentation is very, very straight. The musicianship's absolutely fantastic. You hear that carried on to the next album, Lionheart, right? So these 2 albums in my mind are very piano-based, very focused in a sort of established, you know, band setting. I feel that, you know, 50 Words of Snow, the most recent album, she's returned to that sound. And that has to be treated in my mind in its own way, and that's what we've got here with that album. As she goes on, she starts to experiment in the studio, and the album where she really starts to do that is what I've got at number 2, which is Never Forever. Right, this is where Kate winds it all up. This is really vying almost for number 1. If you're a prog fan, this is the one to go for as well. This is the most progressive one there is. If you're a jazz fusion fan as well, Mahavishnu Orchestra fan, she goes into that territory on the track Egypt. It's really surprising. You listen to that and you can hear that's Kate Bush doing the Mahavishnu Orchestra. But this is just incredible. Babushka, Delius, Blow Away for Bill, All We Ever Look For. That's just a brilliant, quirky song. The Wedding List rocks. Violin, that's like Hendrix on the violin, you know, in rock form. Absolutely incredible. The Infant Kiss, that is a strange song. If you listen to it, a very, very strange song, which really, I think it's based on an early 1960s film. It's actually a ghost story. It's about a child inhabited by an evil man. If you listen to the lyrics, you might find them quite disturbing without that knowledge, but that's an incredible song. Night at the Scented Stock, Army Dreamers, one of the greatest songs ever written. Breathing, one of the greatest songs ever written, right? So that's what I've got at number 2. So what do we have at number 1? We have this, The Dreaming. It's Kate at her most experimental. Kate pushing the boundaries down, taking it so far out that the people couldn't take it. You know, this is where, in terms of most people, she stumbles. And then she gets back on track with Hounds of Love. But this is where she stumbles. She doesn't stumble, she just takes it so far out. This is one of the most experimental mainstream albums, pop albums, ever made. And it's just utterly incredible. The whole album, for me, flows like a prog epic, you know, from beginning to end. Sat in Your Lap, I think, is my favourite Kate Bush song. And it's really about sort of Gnostic esotericism, and that was the single. This is what we have, you know. They must have been looking so hard for a single. There Goes a Tenor. That sort of, you know, which really draws upon that sort of Ealing comedy sort of genre. Pull Out the Pins, Suspended in Gaffer. Leave It Open, The Dreaming, Night at the Swallow. I'm just reading out the tracks. I'm trying to go through all the good tracks in. I'm just going to end up reading them all out. Of course, it ends up with Get Out of My House, where Kate Bush becomes a poltergeist. screaming, "Get out of my house," at these people who have moved into her territory. It ends with her basically doing an impersonation of a donkey. And that she actually is just doing an impersonation of a donkey. That's how the album ends, where the Poltergeist would do that. So yeah, that's what I've got at number 1. So yeah, that's my ranking of the Kate Bush albums. I hope you enjoyed it. I feel like I could go on for longer, but I'm going to stop there because I'd much rather return to Kate another time and get more in depth. I might get into some of these albums in more depth. But anyway, that's my rating of the Kate Bush albums. I hope you enjoy it. If you like, then like. If you subscribe, and please put your comments in, and I'll see you soon. Thank you very much. Bye.